Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Welcome to the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting for the 5th of May 2020. I'd like to welcome anyone joining us. Welcome to at least 2 council members who are joining us as attendees. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We have all 3 committee members accounted for this evening, so we have no so we'll go to item 3, which is public question time and receiving of public statements. And I understand that we have received some questions for this evening. Would that be read out by yourself, CEO?
I was going to invite the manager to read out those questions.
Okay, I'll go to the Manager of Governance. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Cole. So we've received some questions from Dudley Marr of Highgate. The first 6 questions relate to item 7.4 on our agenda. Question 1. Why did the CEO decide that details about the allocation of funds from the Leederville Gardens Trust Fund should be treated as confidential at the meeting of 28th of April 2020, given that a similar recommendation has been made public for the meeting of 5th of May 2020, item 7.4? Question 2, if the reason is because a contract may be entered into which will be discussed at the meeting, Local Government Act section 5.232C, why wasn't the recommendation for the lease of the Beatty Park Cafe considered at the council meeting 17th of March 2020, item 12.1, treated as confidential to the same extent? Question 3, if the reason is because it may disclose information that has a commercial value, for example, Local Government Act section 5.232E2, why wasn't the recommendation for the lease of the Beatty Park Cafe council meeting 17th of March 2020, item 12.1, treated as confidential to the same extent, given that it contains some commercial information, for example, the rent to be paid? And exactly what type of information, as opposed to the actual information, would be considered as having a commercial value, given that the organisations are charitable, benevolent bodies rather than commercial enterprises and are likely to be subject to the State Associations Incorporation Act and the Federal Government Charities Act? Question 4, why has the CEO not released the confidential attachments related to the decision made at the 28th of April 2020 meeting concerning the allocation of money from the Leederville Gardens Trust Fund, item 10.1, so that the community can decide for themselves that the money is well spent, that it provides value for money, that it can be demonstrated that it will only be spent as a direct or indirect consequence of COVID-19 as per the Council's decision of 30th of March 2020, that the money will only be spent on services within the city, and that the money is spent in accordance with the rules of association of the Leederville Gardens Incorporated. Question 5, does the CEO agree that the community has the right to know how much will be spent and on what, given that it is the community's money? And the last question relates to an item considered at the 21st of April COVID committee meeting. At the 21st of April COVID committee meeting, the committee agreed that category 3 tenants could have a repayment plan with a minimum term of 24 months. Item 7.3, clause 2.3.4. Why is a minimum term specified rather than a maximum term, which would make more sense? So that's all the questions, Mayor Cole, and these will be responded to with the responses provided in the 12th of May committee meeting agenda.
Thank you very much, Manager. I note that we also have under 3B a response to previous public questions taken on notice at the last meeting. Did you wish to read out the city's response to Jess Carlson of Cahoots and residing in the suburb of West Leederville?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the response to Jess Carlson of Cahoots of West Leederville's questions were, the question is, are City of Vincent planning to contribute available council resources to help deliver the project more efficiently and comprehensively, for example, databases of residents, areas at higher risk, so our communication can target those at most risk quickly, providing staff not fully utilised as service delivery volunteers and available venues within City of Vincent? The City's response is no. At its 28th of April 2020 meeting, the committee decided not to allocate funds to Cahoots' proposal at this stage. The city is also not legally able to release some of the information requested, including databases of residents. The second question was, will the city connect Cahoots with other project leaders so we can work more collaboratively and combine our projects wherever possible? Noted Cahoots and I do have relationships with several of the listed organisations, CEOs and executive teams. However, we believe it would be more efficient if the City of Vincent provided linkages with the aim of providing a more coordinated and comprehensive approach. The city's response to this question was the city's community partnerships team can support Cahoots and all local community organisations in working more collaboratively. Please contact the city on our general phone number to discuss this, and we've provided those responses to Jess Carlson of Cahoots.
Thank you, Manager. I'll now move to item 4, declarations of interest, and I understand that we do have at least one declaration, CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, we received the identical declaration, impartiality declaration from Councillor Castle in relation to the Leadable Gardens Trust agenda item tonight, which was also considered last week, and the interest being that in 2019 and 2020, Councillor Castle's daughter participated in an unpaid voluntary education program conducted by one of the applicants. That's the only declaration we've received tonight.
Thank you, CEO. The next item is 5 applications for leave of absence. Anyone planning on having a holiday within Perth and Peel at the moment? No requests. Okay, we'll move to item 6, confirmation of minutes. This is for the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting of last week, the 28th of April 2020. So please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes. Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Bondaschewski. All those in favour? I declare the minutes carried. That takes us to business arising, and the first item we have on our agenda is the standing item 7.1, the COVID-19 weekly update. Council members, before seeking a mover and seconder, would you like me to go to the manager of Built Environment and Wellbeing to request an update? Or would you just like, I might just ask the manager if he has a verbal update to give us, or whether he'd just prefer to respond to questions.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the only thing that I will add is that we're expecting an announcement from National Cabinet this Friday coming about the removal of restrictions. So we will be able to report back to the committee on that next week, but we're certainly preparing for whatever information that is going to be.
Thank you, Manager. Right, I'll call for a mover and seconder for the item. Moved Councillor Bondaschewski, seconded Councillor Castle. Councillor Bondaschewski, do you have comments or questions?
I do. It's just in relation to the item in terms of item 7.4, the Leadable Gardens Trust, and the weekly update. I know that there's a key action in the weekly update relating to the expression of interest, and I'm just wondering where we may get regular updates on the progress towards the negotiation around deliverables and progress on delivery of the approved items. Will that be coming through this weekly update, or will there be a separate reporting process for that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm open to having that being included as an additional item in the implementation plan, and that can be reported, say if it's a fairly minor update, that can be included in the weekly update report. If it's a more significant update, then a separate report can be provided to the committee.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Through you, Mayor Cole, one additional comment on that once the funding agreements have been agreed, we'd obviously want to announce those publicly through the Mayor's office, and that nearly always become a good news story on the end of the implementation update report as well. So they won't all be, the funding agreements won't all be agreed at the same time. So that would happen over the next few weeks.
Thank you. And, sorry, I've got another one.
Okay, I could just provide an update on those funding agreements if you would like. So Uniting Care West and St Vinny's with their Passages Perth program, they've both been contacted, and our community partnerships team is drafting the funding agreements with them, and they're proposed to be finalised and signed this week, which means the funding can be released once they're signed. So that should happen within the next week or so. And then the other updates on People Who Care and Rural, we can provide them when we get to item 7.1.
Thank you very much. That's great progress. In relation to item key action 2.19, I see that there was a Mother's Day local buying guide and video development that was being launched. Can I just get an update on the progress for that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I understand that that announcement and video will happen over the next 24 hours.
And the procurement portal campaign is still on track. I believe it's got a Friday date.
Through you, Mayor Cole, could I just ask the Councillor Gonashevsky to repeat the reference? I missed the point.
It's still part of the supporting local businesses, the weekly update for 30 April. It talks about a procurement portal campaign will begin Friday. I'm just checking to see if that's on track, given the, I guess, short delay in relation to the Mother's Day buying local guide.
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Cole, my understanding is that it is on track for this coming Friday, and I'll confirm that after this meeting.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Gonashevsky. Also, just to add, I did put up a Mother's Day local buying guide on my own social medias on Friday, which I shared on Instagram and Facebook, and have had quite a good response to. Councillor Castle.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just a couple of questions. I realise this was a fairly recent announcement, but I'm just wondering if we've had any more information come through about the mandatory hygiene training that's going to be required for our businesses, and how that is proposed to be delivered.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we have. The announcement to make that training mandatory was made prior to us knowing in local government. So we're currently in liaison with the Australian Hotels Association, Tourism WA and the Department of Health to actually work out how that's going to work on the ground, because what that announcement has done is generated that expectation within the community that businesses will be required to do this mandatory training. It was developed by the AHA, which is the Australian Hotels Association. So they represent probably some of the more of the larger of the small businesses out there in the community. So we're certainly advocating on behalf of the smaller businesses in terms of their uptake of that particular training, but also trying to have the training tailored for people who don't have English as their first language. So we're certainly providing the intel that we have from a local government perspective to a state working group that is looking at this training.
Thank you. That was my concern, I guess, that we are monitoring how our local businesses are responding to that, and whether and what their access will be, in particular those much smaller businesses and perhaps some of our community groups that might require to do that training to get up and running as well. So I'm happy for that to be sort of ongoing updates as we get more information about how that'll be delivered. I had another question in relation to Manor Inc. In the notes it refers to operating with reduced clients, and I'm just wondering are there reduced clients because there's reduced demand or because reduced capacity to look after them? I don't know who will answer that question.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think some of that background was provided in the previous report on homelessness to the committee, but I don't have that to hand about what that specific reduction number is. So I'll provide that offline to Councillor Castle, if that's okay.
Thank you, and I'll do a bit of my own research as well. I have a question also about item 1.7 in relation to some collaboration with Belgravia in providing more fitness sessions. And I noticed that it's proposed that Belgravia run these programs as they can access JobKeeper. I'm just wondering, are there any opportunities for our staff to be involved in that on a casual basis, or is there really not enough demand to go around?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll respond to that. So, yeah, there's not enough work there to support some of our casuals who are currently not rostered because of the closure of BD Park. This is what we're really trying to do, is assist Belgravia to get some of their permanent employees up and employed and active, and also we're making available some of our recreation spaces as part of that in a cooperative arrangement with them. So yeah, unfortunately our staff are not beneficiaries of this particular program, but we'll be looking at other opportunities as well.
Thank you. And in relation to, I'm just seeking a bit of clarification around the various portals that are referred to in the implementation plan. There's the procurement portal that was referred to earlier, and in 2.28 there is reference to a new COVID-19 portal launching this week. I'm just wondering if you can clarify, is this one portal that is going to deal with a number of different COVID-related issues, or are they separate areas of the website, or do we have one central place that people can come to for COVID information?
You go, Virginia.
No, I was actually going to say, Mark, can I throw that to you?
For you, Mayor Cole, what we're looking at with the COVID-19 portal is to have a one-stop shop for businesses and community members to be able to access information on COVID-19. So we don't go into that traditional sort of structure of a website where you have to go to different pages to look at planning or health, for example. And for example, one business can access all the information from one page.
Thank you, that's all, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Just we're seeking some feedback from the manager of Built Environment and Wellbeing. Is that correct? I finally cracked the name. Great. I just wanted to just sort of see if I could get your observations, perhaps also fed back to you through the Rangers, about how the 10-person gathering has been going in some of our public places, whether you're comfortable that the public places are running well. I did observe on the weekend that Leederville was much busier, which is really nice to see, but it did sort of cross my mind that the alfresco area next to Crank is probably something that does require more regular cleaning if people are sitting and eating food in that location. And I did observe the skate park, there were some kids there, so we might just need to reassess whether our signage and whether we need to sort of have more tape or barrier, visual barriers in operation. Yep, so that was a question for you, Manager.
To you, Mayor Cole. Just before this meeting, I was looking at some of the data that's come from our Rangers. I'm encouraged to see that the Rangers are continuing to do their visits 4 times a day in our public reserves. I think what you're bringing up is a good point there, in that there should be some other public spaces that could be considered to be included within that, monitoring. I know that Leaderville has become popular. In terms of my own personal observations, I was out in the community on the weekend and noticed that people were sort of really enjoying being able to have that increase up of groups of up to 10 people, which was to be expected, and it was a beautiful weekend as well. So if that was going to be a test to see how we were going, then it was probably the ideal weekend to monitor that. I understand also that the WA police have been patrolling some of the more busier reserves as well, and reinforcing the message that the city has been sending around. In terms of your question regarding the seated area near Crank's Coffee at Leaderville, we look at some options there. I'm a big fan of not having huge amount of signage, but perhaps more being able to use some visual cues like the paving in Hyde Park, pavement painting in Hyde Park. I think that people are a bit more responsive to some visual cues as well as just signage, because there is so much COVID signage around. But we can certainly look at some fairly innovative ways to try and manage those sorts of issues and monitor them on an ongoing basis. I doubt we'd have the same problem today with the weather, but certainly for those sunny days, yes.
Thank you, Manager. We do have, I think, Mother's Day coming up on Sunday with something like 27 degrees, which sounds like another cracker of a day. Yeah, and just don't need to go back to this, but I am interested to know about the cleaning regime for that al fresco area at Crank. I'm happy for you to follow up on that one another time. Are there any further comments or questions in relation to this item? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. That takes us to item 7.2, COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Strategy Communication. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Moved Councillor Castle. Seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. And just noting there is an alternate item for consideration for this item. Councillor Castle, you've moved the officer recommendation. Do you wish to speak to it or ask any questions?
I have a couple of quick questions, Mayor. I'm just wondering if there is a particular definition or timeline around the 3 phases that's referred to in this this document, response, recovery, renewal. And I appreciate that we may move not only through the 3 phases, but backwards, depending on how things play out. But I'm just keen to know how we're defining those 3 phases and where we might be right now. Are we in recovery right now?
Through you, Mayor Cole, those time periods aren't fixed with months because there are varying estimates of how long some of the COVID-19 restrictions will last, but the horizon's anywhere between 6 and 18 months, heavily dependent on whether or not there is a vaccine. Probably a rough rule of thumb would be the responses, the initial first few weeks, essentially the first month, to react to the restrictions coming in, and then the recovery is how to recover from and operate within those restrictions, which is where we currently are now. So the sort of 1 to 3 months, and then moving into more of a recovery phase, depending on when restrictions might be lifted. I might just see if the manager or the executive director wanted to comment on that interpretation as well.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't necessarily think that the 3 phases are nice, neat little phases like what the CEO was alluding to. I think sometimes there could be a merging of the response into the recovery. And as we've seen almost from the time that the public health response commenced, the economic recovery phase commenced almost immediately straight after due to the impact straight away. But also there's a response aspect that there are other public health consequences that occur as a result of COVID, which inform the recovery aspect. So if I would just correlate that to the implementation plan, I would say that it's probably as close as possible to, say, a short, medium and long-term actions around COVID-19.
Thank you. Look, I'm happy to see the progress that has been made, and obviously having the action set out in this way is helpful, is a good starting point. I am supportive of the alternative that we may deal with in due course if we get to that point, because I think it will be a better streamlined way for us to deal with not only the decision making that we are facing in relation to COVID-19, but how we communicate that with the public. I would be very keen in future iterations, however that is presented to us, to see more detail of what has been done, what's proposed to be done, some timelines around it, so that what we have right now is sort of proposals for which phase, but I know that some of these things have already happened, some might still be on the cards. So something a bit more similar to how we are presented for the implementation plan. I also would like to see a bit more detail given to how we're dealing with communication with vulnerable people and those who might not have access to the internet or email or our online communication tools that obviously everyone is relying very heavily on at the moment, but that really does leave a portion of our community out in the cold. So I think that would be great if we could have some more actions and detail about how we're going to deal with that. So I'm not supportive of it as it is. I think the alternative that we might see shortly gives a bit more structure to how we're going to deal with this communication plan going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Councillor Gonchevsky, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I just have a question in relation to the private message and online chat functionality and whether that's been implemented.
Through you, Mayor Cole, my understanding, I was wondering whether the Executive Director was going to respond. My understanding is we haven't implemented that at this stage, and it would require an enhancement to our current website, which I don't think we've got that technical fix yet, and I don't think we've procured it at this stage.
Right. Well, I guess, look, I'll echo Councillor Castle's comments in relation to the usefulness of this document without having an understanding of timelines and whether things have been completed. At this point in time, I'm not even sure I can call it a list of actions because I don't know if they have been acted upon or if it's a list of proposals. So I certainly think it falls short of what I would see in a communications plan, but at the same time, I can appreciate there's a lot of great ideas here and there's a lot of good work that's been done in the communication space. So this is more an issue in relation to how you would actually structure a document so that it becomes a useful tool, both for the people that are using it internally in the organisation and also for us as councillors to ensure that we have that oversight in relation to communications activities. I think that I'm supportive of discussing an alternative just to make sure that we're clear on what we expect in terms of communications through this time across Australia and internationally during crises and pandemics and times of upheaval. Organisational communications are very important, and I think we've seen both good and bad in COVID at an international perspective as well as at more local levels. So I'm very keen to see that we continue some good work that's been done and also have some good structure to our communications going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Gontaszewski. I don't support the officer recommendation in its simple form because I have put an alternate motion on the table for consideration. So really what I'm seeking is that there's a bit more of a connection between the communications plan and the COVID-19 strategy and implementation plan, and that where we get to is that is forms an attachment, if you like, to the strategy document so that we do get that weekly update. And I think that we need to have some real clarity around what our key themes and communication campaigns are during COVID-19 so that we're very clear about what the priorities are and what's the fundamentally important communications that we focus on during this time. So I would prefer that we actually have something that is really working in strong tandem with the strategy and implementation document, and they're coming to us with regular reports and giving an opportunity for those communications from this committee to be high priority and communicated really quickly and effectively when we make major decisions at this committee. So happy to accept and note the work that has been done to date, but really seeking for the committee to provide a little bit more of a stronger direction in communications and really dovetailing that and making sure that's working really well with what we're doing with our strategy and implementation plan. So I'll put the officer recommendation, and is there any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? All those against? Declare it lost. There's an alternate motion before you on the screen. It's moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Castle. Councillor Gontaszewski, do you wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Nicole. Really just to quickly add that following on from what you were just saying then about really tying this to the implementation plan, it would be good if this communication plan attachment can actually map the way it connects to that implementation plan. So we know that we have items 2.14, etc. in the implementation plan. How does that flow through to our communication strategies? And I think this particular alternative recommendation will give us a way to more closely tie the committee and in particular the mayor to these key messages that are coming out to the community. So supportive of the alternative recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. I don't need to repeat myself, but it does ask for a reason that I put this forward, and as a person who put it on the table, really it is really, as reiterated previously, that it's about really connecting the communications to the implementation plan and giving an opportunity for key themes and campaigns to be considered and prioritised so that we are very clear about when we are talking to our community, it's not a time to go down pathways on matters that might not be of utmost importance, but to really be quite solid in our communications and consistent, and to decide when we are going through an implementation plan, what are the key issues and communication that we really do need to provide to our community and the public. You can, for example, note that as we go through our budgeting exercise, that's going to be a really key communication campaign that we really need to focus on and explain issues around GRV valuation, etc. That's going to be a really big one for us to deal with, because we'll be looking at much reduced services. We'll have to talk in detail about what's happened to the revenue, etc. So that's going to be a key campaign that will really require a lot of focus and good communication around. Probably one that I'd point to at the moment that's running has been the Open for Business in Vincent, which has been our sort of key campaign around business support. So it's about really outlining what are those key campaigns, and where there's resourcing and prioritisation, we should really be focusing on those. So this really strongly ties it back to the implementation plan and ensures that this committee can keep across what that key messaging is during this pandemic period. So unless there are any comments or questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 7.3, bulk hard waste collection, proposed new service date. I have a mover and seconder for this item. Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to see this back on the agenda and on the timetable, because I am aware there's been many members of the community very keen to access this service. And I can see that as we've moved through the response to COVID, that some of those earlier concerns can be addressed now. I do have a few questions. I'm just wondering to the Executive Director, have we seen any evidence of increase in extra items ending up in our recycling and landfill bins as a result of no access to, not only to our bulk waste collection, but to a number of other recycling and donation services?
Yes, through you, Nicole. Yes, the tonnage in our domestic bins has gone up, and that appears to be a common theme with other local governments as well, you know, when we talk to them. The other thing to mention is that Madarra Regional Council have told us that there's definitely an increase in members of the public using their facilities through this time. So they've noticed an increase in not commercial tons, but in families turning up to dispose of items.
And I note that one of the concerns, or one of the remaining concerns, is still having items placed out on the verge much earlier than the collection, particularly with some confusion around the dates. And I'm just wondering if we're proposing to put some sort of stricter limits on the amount when people can place their items out. This was discussed when we talked about the future of the bulk waste collection service some time ago. And I'm just wondering if that's part of the proposal, that we keep that time frame pretty short.
Yes, through you, Nicole, that's correct. We did discuss it last year, and so when we advertised initially the services for this year, we reduced the set-out time, I think, to, from memory, the weekend before the collection was due. So we already made that reduction compared to previous years. So it's definitely the plan to continue that reduced set-out time, because it does reduce problems and it reduces scavenging as well, which can be an issue for us.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I'm happy to support. I think that, you know, following on from the previous item, the communication around this is going to be crucial, because there will be some confusion in the community, because not only have we had to change dates, but the timeframes are different and the process is slightly different. So obviously it'd be good to see some really strong communication on exactly how this is going to work.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
I just, yes, echo Councillor Castle's comments in relation to the comms. Very pleased to see a date, because I agree, I think possibly where the community has been concerned is in relation to that uncertainty around when everybody's favourite bulk waste collection might return. I guess I just wanted to ask, in terms of the options paper around bulk waste, I'm sorry if I've missed it in the report, if that is planning on coming for discussion at council, or as part of, I guess, preparation of the budget for this year.
Through you, Nicole. Yeah, that work's gone on in tandem at the same time. So that is intended to come to workshop with councillors, the work we've done in May, and then on to council in June in the formal report.
Excellent, thank you very much. And just in relation to scavenging, I note that the, I guess the primary restriction around scavenging will be the reduced presentation time. Just wondering if there's any commentary around if it's considered to be a risk, or if given the, I guess, negligible potential level of community transmission within WA, it's considered to be a minimal risk in the community.
through you, Michael. We believe it is a minimal risk, as described. The virus obviously can survive on surfaces for a period of time, depending on the surface and the conditions. So the risk of somebody scavenging and picking up the virus is low. However, we will still discourage it because there is a risk remaining. So we discourage scavenging for that reason. And when we do discourage it anyway, in many ways, because some scavenging, people can be very selective of what they take, leave quite a mess on the verge, etc. So it's not something that we encourage as a city. So we would do the normal thing, but increase that discouragement because of the COVID crisis, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Nothing further from me.
Thank you, Councillor Gontaszewski. Just a question for the Executive Director. I had raised, I think it was in a meeting with the CEO, whether, and this was at the time when we had tighter restrictions, whether the city might look at skip bins as an alternate, given the concerns that some people have with scavenging, and at the time the contractor was a bit concerned about staff health and ability to work through a pandemic. Was skip bin alternative looked at as a sort of an option, given that we are still dealing with a pandemic, even with restrictions starting to be lifted? And was there any cost comparison undertaken?
Yes, Michael, we obviously did consider it as a short-term option, but we didn't propose it as part of this report because we can get the full service back up and running with our contractor and cover everyone. I think the concern with the skip bin trial would be firstly the number of skips that we could, or the number of verges where we could fit skips, and the number of people that we could service, bearing in mind the public reaction to this. A lot of people at home sort of complaining that the service isn't happening, so we didn't feel through a trial we could necessarily service the number of people that needed the service, if that makes sense. However, skip bins and other forms of on-demand service are definitely part of the options appraisal for council to look at when we bring that paper forward.
Yeah, I guess I just thought that this was probably a time where skip bins on demand might be preferable still to having junk throughout the city of Vincent, particularly during winter months. So that's something I would have liked to see mentioned and dealt with in the report as an option. But I do understand that from the report that people would like to see the service, and I understand that people are spending a lot of time at home and doing cleanups, and if the contractor's confident that that can be delivered, and if we can manage the lead-in times and scavenging, which sometimes leads to dispersal of rubbish in neighbourhoods, I think we've just got to be really tight on that this year, because I think there's nothing worse than seeing junk discarded when you are dealing with public health issues. So I just think we have to be incredibly mindful that whilst we might have restrictions easing, we are still in a pandemic, and health is vitally important right now. So as I mentioned, would have liked to have entertained that idea of skip bin and at least know what the comparative figure would be for the cost of the general at 230,000, how many skip bins that might have been able to purchase. But I think that it is really about moving forward and continuing to offer our services as much as we possibly can. So, so I will support it. Are there any further comments or questions? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Brings us to item 7.4, which is the Leederville Gardens Inc. Trust COVID-19 Relief Fund recommendations. Just noting that there are some confidential attachments that accompany this item. So council members, if you wanted to ask any questions about those attachments, please let me know, because we will have to go into a confidential session for that. But perhaps we could start by moving and seconding the item and seeing how we go. Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I may be able to ask my questions in a manner that doesn't require going behind closed doors, but if Councillor Castle or yourself, Mayor Cole, have any other questions, it may be more prudent to discuss them in that way.
Councillor Castle, would you like to discuss the attachments in any detail? Do you think?
No, through you, Mayor Cole, I'm happy to remain in open session. I don't have any specific questions. So.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see how we go, Councillor Gondaszewski.
Yeah, this is just in relation to the updated submission from People Who Care. At the meeting last week, I had indicated that I would be supportive of potentially either an increased funding amount from that agency or the same allocation but over a 6-month period to increase the number of residents that could be use that service. And just wondering if those discussions occurred and where it wasn't considered appropriate to deliver over 6 months rather than 12, or just some commentary on that would be really useful.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the Community Partnerships team had these discussions with People Who Care. Karen Baum is unable to attend this evening's meeting, and she has given me some notes from her discussions. I'm not sure of the exact reason why 6 months wasn't the option, but the option is for the funds to be distributed over the 12 months.
Thank you. I guess the lesson for me probably is that I should put it in the recommendation if I really want to ensure that the action is going to happen. But I was a little disappointed that it didn't appear that there was evidence that those discussions had happened. That said, I'm very pleased to receive the more detailed submission from RUA and also the updated submission from People Who Care, because I think they're both valuable initiatives. In terms of further reporting, I understand from our discussions in relation to the weekly update that there will be some update in relation to the disbursement of these funds and the progress against each allocation that will be included in the weekly update. But I was wondering, in terms of this recommendation, I may just craft some words in relation to requesting an additional report to come back to this group in perhaps, just thinking 3 months after the commencement of the People Who Care project, just to look at numbers to see whether it would be worth perhaps considering an additional increase in funding towards that particular project. So I'll leave it to others to speak. I'll just put together some words.
I just make a suggestion before I go to the seconder that could actually apply to more than one of the providers, because there are others there that have sought funds for a small amount of people, and you could see that if they were very successful programs, they would be very worthy of additional funding. So just a suggestion while you craft your words, and I'll go to the seconder now.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. That's exactly what I was going to say, that I think that we could have something built into both these particular funding allocations and the allocation of funds in general to talk about, we're not expending all of the funds in this initial round, how we will deal with perhaps a second round or applications for additional extended funding for the organisations that we're already supporting. So yeah, those words could perhaps deal with that, but I can foresee that we'll be coming back to this in the not too distant future with perhaps more applications and amended applications for the rest of the funds.
Through you, Mayor Cole, can I just add something? I understand that Community Partnerships teams has been in discussion with People Who Care and RUA and are close to finalising the funding agreements. And the proposal is that the funds are paid on a quarterly basis, so there'll be acquittal and reporting requirements. So they won't get the funds as a one-off, and they'll have to meet certain requirements before we provide the further funds, if that assists.
Just in terms of where, oh sorry, Councillor Castle, keep going. I thought you might have.
Well, no, sorry, Mayor Cole, I was actually going to ask a question about what the manager just said. If they're being provided these funds on a quarterly basis, is that acceptable, given that probably most of this relief needs to be provided immediately, not over a 12-month period? I mean, obviously that will be part of the negotiations, but there may need to be an acceleration of those milestones and those payments to actually, for this money to be spent where it's needed and when it's needed.
Through you, Mayor Cole, perhaps if I can take that one and explore it a little bit tomorrow, because I agree we want those funds to be getting out to the community, but we also want to make sure we have some good governance and an acquittal process so that we're actually paying for services that have been provided. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. So let me take that one offline and I'll see if I can resolve that question.
Councillor Castle, did you have anything further? Yes, I guess it's just really in terms of the level of expenditure from our EOI, which was sorry, up to $1 million. We haven't really, I don't think we've actually even reached half at this point. So just really seeking some feedback on round 2 and at what point we might look at that. And is it a matter of keeping it open to PBIs that wish to come forward, or tracking how we go with this initial round of funding?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if I could just make a comment on that. Once these funding agreements are in place, hopefully in the next week, then we'd probably suggest that we could relaunch and make public the remaining funds that the committee would be willing to consider for disbursement. So we could essentially de facto open a second round and clarifying how much funding would be available, whether it's the balance of the 1 million or anything over and above that.
I think that's the thing that Councillor Gondaszewski is sort of getting to there, is that we have got some really good programs and initiatives on the table, some of which have sought relatively low amounts of money but could be very successful. And I think that we would like to be able to broaden the number of people that they can service if that need materialises. So I think we just probably have to have a think about how we make some allocation for that as well, given that we would have established a working relationship and have these programs running, and if they are successful, it would be good to have funds to either continue or expand them. Councillor Gondaszewski, you were working on a form of words. Have you landed that?
Well, I think what I'm seeking is that we request further updates on each project 3 months after project commencement on service uptake and funds expenditure, and potentially something else if there's anything else, you know. But essentially, for the reason that Mayor Cole has said, is that we absolutely may find that some of these programs are oversubscribed according to the metrics that have been put forward. I'd absolutely appreciate the Executive Director having a look at that and identifying potential key projects that may benefit from perhaps a different or a model of funding allocation to allow for community need to be addressed in a timely fashion while still maintaining governance. But yeah, essentially, I think I would like to move an amendment that would make, I think it's, what is it, 0.5? To propose a 0.6 that requests that the Chief Executive Officer provide an update on each project after 3 months from commencement on service uptake and expenditure of funds.
Can I just suggest, are you also trying to capture and consider potential expansion or broadening where demand is shown? No, I'm not being very wordy tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm struggling on the words as well. Yes, I guess so. I don't know whether that's the reason or whether that's part of the recommendation.
Yeah, I guess that still does what you need it to do, and we understand where we can go from there. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Castle not wishing to second the amendment. Councillor Castle frozen.
Looks quite frozen or
We
very.
need a seconder.
Frozen.
I can't second an amendment.
We might just pause for 5 seconds.
Councillor Castle has just had a blackout.
Oh no, the storm.
What is our, she is attempting to get back into the meeting. I can't remember what our guidelines
How about if she, would it be acceptable if she appears on the screen of my phone, Manager of Governance?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think the easiest thing would be if Councillor Castle could just join us via her telephone, because if she clicks on the Zoom link, she should be able to get back in, but I might just call her now just to ask her to do that. And everyone else could check if their windows are closed in their homes, if the rain's coming through.
Yeah.
Hi, Alex.
Councillor Fotakis is asking if she could step in as a deputy because she is observing.
That's a good question. I'll have to go to the Manager of Governance for that one. That's tricky because it's a flow. What do you think, Manager
I
of
think
Governance?
we did have deputies appointed, didn't we,
Oh
Malika?
yeah, she's absolutely a deputy, and it's a very...
That's correct. And there are a number of elected members who are listing in as attendees. So that's
through you, Mayor
possible.
Cole, Councillor Castle's coming back online very shortly. It was just
Okay. It's a good question, though. I think we should explore that in terms of technical difficulties. If we have some of our council members observing and we have technical issues, could a delegate jump in?
Yep.
So, CO, we're just waiting for Councillor Castle for a couple of minutes. Is that your advice?
through you, Mayor Cole. Yes, the power's back on and she is logging back in.
We're so close to finishing the meeting.
Through you, Mayor Cole, Councillor Gontaszewski, are you happy with the wording of this additional recommendation 6 then that's on the screen?
Yes, the Pedenting we would put a comma after project and commencement, but that's it, really.
Oh, hello, Alex. Councillor Castle, we see you. That will do. We're happy to take you.
Oh, there she is.
You're on mute though. Can you unmute off your phone?
My apologies. I had a very brief blackout and my computer is complaining about being turned back on again in a hurry.
No, you're fine. We understand.
So I don't even know what I'm on my phone right now.
So where we were at is we were dealing
a pretty
with
severe wind at my house. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Pretty good. So I think it's going to get even worse. Apparently around 7 p.m. So we were just dealing with the amendment, and I believe that you had seconded. Oh, actually, I had asked you if you wished to second, but then you froze. Are you happy to second the amendment on the screen?
Yeah. Sorry, I haven't seen the amendment. Hang on.
Do you want me to read it to you?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to second.
Okay.
That.
Right. Councillor Gontaszewski, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
No, I think I've said my bit.
Councillor Castle? No? Okay, all right. I'll put the amendment. All those in favour?
No.
Can't see your hand. Yep, there it is. All right, great. It's passed unanimously. We're to the substantive. Any further comments on the substantive motion? No? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. I can't see a hand there yet. There you go. All in favour. Thank you, carried. Okay, this is Zoom life. This is Zoom life in the storm. Okay, so moving on to the final item this evening. Item 8 is announcements by the presiding member. I will very briefly mention that we have just released our Arts Relief Grant EOI for grant funds up to $10,000 to support local artists. Yes, big clap, Director, it's amazing. This is funds from our developer contributions through Percent for Art. We're very lucky to have this $500,000 from developers who have contributed this funds to us in lieu of putting artwork on their buildings. They have provided it to the city so that we can provide public art for the benefit of the community. And given that our arts community has really suffered during COVID-19 in terms of job security, loss of projects, etc., this is much needed relief. So, wow, so I'm seeing 2 Alexes, so I'm back to 1. So look, it's a really great initiative, and it's already had a really strong response from the arts community as welcome relief. So the theme is really documenting life during COVID-19, which is a very unique time to be living through, and we're really excited about this. And I'd like to say a big thank you to our Arts Relief Working Group, chaired by Councillor Fotakis, and participating on that also Councillor Smith and Councillor Wallace, and also to our Arts Officer Tegan and our Director of Community and Business. So thanks to everyone for getting that going, and we look forward to seeing those grants applications coming through. That is part 1 of 2. There is going to be a second round, and that will be focused on some larger scale art and focused also in our town centres. So just getting this underway, and then a second round will occur. General business, any items to raise, anybody? No? We don't have any confidential items this evening, and our next meeting will be on the 12th of May 2020. We will be looking at issues like traffic management and tenant financial assistance requests. Probably other things that will come up, as we are expecting, as our manager has told us, an announcement from National Cabinet on Friday. So thank you very much everyone for participating, and I'll end the meeting at 6:02 p.m. Thank you.